Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Mike and Tommy. Hello.
Good morning. Oh, good morning, Mike. How you doing?
Well, have you ever had those weeks where you underestimated how much work it was for things?
I feel like I do that all the time,
Is
but
it like every day for you?
it feels like that sometimes.
Well, this week I was trying to rebuild some of my existing content for training pieces, which it all went well. Training's gone well. I have so the last day is today, so I've got the content built. It's done. It's ready to go. I think it went well. But man, I thought I had it more together than I did, and I was like, yeah, I'm good. I got a lot of things prepared, and I've been up like late every night just preparing and cleaning and making new slides, and like, it's been very good, very rewarding. But I'm exhausted.
Dude, I'm sorry to hear that. I know what you mean. There's a lot of coffee in my house right now, in my office that I have my espresso machine in. I was saying it's a good and bad thing that it's here.
So yes, I agree with you. So let me. I have my coffee machine here as well at my house. So mine's sadly upstairs. I have to go upstairs to go get it. But before we do that, so we're going to talk about news and things. Let's just give you the main topic for today. Our main topic today is going to talk about C# scripting in Tabular Editor, TE, as we like to abbreviate the names, versus using TMDL or TMDL view. And I'm actually going to throw in a little bit of DAX Query View as well, because I'm loving these two tools that are now solely inside desktop. So that's our main topic for today. Let's go talk about some news real quick here before we get going on the podcast. All right, Tony, what are you finding? What's the news happening?
So we have two great Power BI updates, and curious with the blog. Do you think they're going to combine the two and the Fabric blog and Power BI blog into one? Because I'm going to a lot of different places. All right.
It's confusing to have two of them, honestly. I get that they are separate tools, and I think even the community is pushing back a little bit. I've just read some articles that just kind of been like, why are we trying to make Fabric everything that Power BI is? But Microsoft just recently announced, I thought I just saw a couple tweets and or Microsoft earnings call that Microsoft Power BI has 30 million monthly users every month. I was like, wow, Tommy, we chose the right career to be in a growing space where they have that many users who need help with things. That's a pretty substantial number.
Dude, we have a lot of more people to reach. That's what that means.
Well, this is I mean, even years ago when I was just starting to do teaching about stuff, I kept thinking like everyone should know Power BI. I've been doing it, everyone else should know it, but I keep remembering like Power BI has been out for like 10 years now, and now people are still just getting started with Power BI right now. I couldn't imagine just starting with Power BI right now. I'm looking at it. I'm doing this class I'm teaching right now. There's a lot of things to learn, like DAX, how to write things. You have DAX Query View. I've updated this is one of the reasons why I updated my training material. I wanted to include TMDL Editor and DAX Query View because these are really good experiences for like automating and making multiple changes all at once. Way different than it used to be. I think the tool is getting very, very, very powerful nowadays.
100%. So I think with that number just means that we need to expand our audience. So if everyone knows 5 people, that's the Kevin Bacon effect.
Yeah.
And then we'll eventually get to everyone knowing the Power BI, our wonderful podcast that nobody listens to.
We probably have like less than 0.1% of the population listening to the podcast at this point. So tell your friends about the Explicit Measures podcast. This is talking about one of the most prolific and popular BI tools in the world. So let your friends know that this is a good waste of your time for an hour.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So, my friends, the first article we had, speaking of which, has to do with Copilot and all the Copilot updates. This is introducing enhanced conversations with Microsoft Copilot. And of course, / preview.
I mean, any improvement is a better improvement over what you had. I mean, I even have my shirt on today. Does Copilot told me to say it?
Yeah. Great choice.
How fitting.
So this actually has to do with just a better functionality for accuracy in the chat and context. And I think you're seeing all these other tools with context becoming more and more of a bigger thing.
Sure.
That simply with Copilot, you're going to be able to enable this additional context. So not a whole ton of features and seeing it yet. They're just you know that it's on the way.
Okay.
But I think it's like Microsoft now has on their AI Foundry, like DeepSeek and all everything else. They're like, oh, I wonder if we can integrate that. So more context for my data, please.
I mean, I will say this. Copilot is interesting. Of the places that I like to use Copilot, I'm going to talk about Copilot as a general item. I think Copilot is deceiving a little bit because it's like there's a Power BI Copilot, there's like the Fabric Copilot, there is a Copilot for Office. Like they're all Copilot, but obviously the code is not the same for all of them, right? It has to be more contextually aware of like what's going on. In the places that I find Copilot is most effective for me, it has been always inside the notebooks. Writing code,
Mm.
Copilots are really good, and I really enjoy that part of the experience. So, anyways, I'll just point out like they're talking about Copilot for data engineering and data science. Yeah, 100%. When I'm writing code or asking it, how do I write a Python function? Can create a class? How do I create a class? It's spot on. It's really good. So that in that regard, I really like Copilot. Still, jury's out about everything else with Copilot and Power BI. I've tried a couple times. It wasn't too impressive. It did some things that were helpful. Um, but and it, where I think what OpenAI just released, what is it? Their actions? What are they called? I
So
mean,
they have two things. They have their deep research, or their which is basically, or their O3 model, which is just basically that, like the reasoning and thinking, right? But then the other thing is the operator you might be talking about,
that's
like
what
the
I'm talking
task.
about. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think for me, my personal preference here is I was kind of calling this about a year ago, saying like AI is good, but just giving me like reasoning and thinking, like that's somewhat helpful. I can use it to start my ideas about a topic or something I want to write about. Where I find AI has been really useful for me is in the generative space, right? Generating images, backgrounds, things are not copyright protected. Like that's huge for me. So having stuff like that is massively improving what I work with. But when I start having the agents or the Copilot, when I can tell Copilot to align all my visuals, when I can tell Copilot to switch out all the pie charts for bar charts and remove the title axes, like right, that's to me that's when the action part of it, when the operator version of Copilot comes out, that we can start operating on reports and having it do multiple actions on things. I think that's where I'm going to really start finding value from Copilot. So I don't think we're there yet. I'm really hoping that that's where we eventually land. But just as a kind of an outsider looking at it, that's where I'd like to see it go.
No, I'm 1,000% with you. Just make that integration. If it was as seamless as the GitHub Copilot was, oh my goodness, would that be incredible for us, right? Because you use the Copilot fabric and it's fine, but compared to actually using the GitHub integration, we were like, hey, I can take any repository, I can take any package, it doesn't matter what it is, give it to the Copilot in GitHub, like a repo, which repos, and we've
Yep.
talked about this. It's
Yep.
like, hey, you could, basically take a look at this. What's broken? What can I do? How do I use it? Why can we do that if we have Tyndall context?
Yeah. Yes, and I think I feel like I saw Alex Powers say something like, Copilot now has the ability to read descriptions of measures and names of measures and a little bit more context around what's going on there. I think I think that's where we're going to go though. Like I think this is going to emphasize more of the point that you need well documented models. You need more context about what's happening in the model. And I think Copilot, particularly as it gets closer and closer to like now, it can see maybe you can see DAX query view queries, maybe it can see Tyndall, maybe it can see all the descriptions of the measures and things. That makes more sense. It's going to push us to make sure when we certify a data set or a semantic model, we're going to be focusing more of our attention on getting the descriptions and everything populated into the model. The model will be the documentation.
1,000%. Yeah, so I can't wait. And it's funny because we always talk about Copilot too from the developer point of view, and I guess that makes sense. But they're trying to build both sides of the coin. Like you have the AI skills. I don't know if you've touched that yet.
I have not. I haven't really spent a lot of time getting in there. Yeah, and I'm busy on things. I'm up late training people
Yes.
on getting started with Power BI. I'm not having a lot of extra time to go spend on agents. I also don't have a lot of customers in my world asking me to help them build agents, right? So is the demand there? Not that I see for my customers. So if a customer wants me to help figure something out, they think it's valuable to them, then maybe I'll spend some more time on it. But right now, I don't have time to. I'm still more just trying to get people started with Power BI, getting them using the regular Power BI interface and governing that part. That's where we're struggling right now.
Yeah. We'll get there. Well, speaking of more Copilot updates, something that has to do with more code. And this is the second update. This is on the Power BI blog, not the Fabric blog. The other one that we're talking about, even though it was Power BI, was on the Fabric blog. This is Microsoft Fabric Copilot to write queries in Power BI update. It almost sounds like a New York Times title, too, rather than AI generated. This is really cool. And this is from our good friend Zoe. So unless she's using a AI to generate titles instead, please make this read like a news headline or PR release. I like this much better than amazing, change your world kind of thing with our new settings update.
Yeah, exactly
Uh,
right.
so going back to what Copilot does best is
This is what I
code.
was talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
I just made the comment, something about like this with this update where you're just skimming the object. I knew I thought I heard it somewhere. This is what it was. Descriptions are a property of the model, synonyms are there, and sample values. All those now can be fed into the Copilot to help you get answers. That makes sense. Like that's the kind of this is what I was talking about.
Yeah, so this is pretty cool. This is pretty awesome. We just talked about this too in our announcements, or what we did our Fabric draft about the descriptions and titles in One Lake catalog. Well, holy crap! You want to talk about generation? You don't need no stinking script and custom code. Just ask Copilot to help you look at descriptions, go through them. Also, they also talked about synonyms too. We've talked about a ton when it done, and it's like that's almost a daunting task for an individual to do, to go through an entire model, and it takes a lot of time for something you may not use. Copilot's got it.
So you can actually tell Copilot to make the synonyms. That's
Exactly,
me. That's
exactly.
the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. We're starting to get to the point where things are actionable, right? To me,
This is yeah.
it also feels like a point where we're, imagine you wanted to do some documenting of your model. You should be able to kind of like pop open Copilot and just say, "Hey, Copilot, document my model by adding descriptions and synonyms for all my measures and columns." And what it should come back with is like a menu, a screen that says, "Here's all the things that I think you should add. I've already pre-written everything for you. Just read them over. Do they make sense? Or
Mhm.
am I right in what I've assumed about this information?" That would be really helpful.
That and I mean that's exactly what we have because Mike, I've gone through descriptions and been that person where they want to use the chat feature and or even like the natural language feature with
Mhm.
having the proper information there. And it's a lot of time to do if you want to get it right for something you may not be sure that is going to be widely used. And
Oh,
so this is a great way that Copilot come in. Again, going back to our point, it doesn't necessarily have to have the most perfect description off the bat.
nope.
For a lot of people, as
Gotta have
long as
something.
you know something, and then we can update, we can prioritize it rather than looking at all blanks.
I'll be very clear here. I was showing people how to use some of the AI visuals. The two AI visuals that I like to use that Microsoft has produced is the decomposition tree, which I think is pretty fantastic. It's a good looking visual, and it makes. I mean, with a little bit of clicking around, it makes sense immediately what you're doing with it. Like, oh, it's decompressing or decomposing this single number into all the different parts of that number. Where does it break down? Great, makes total sense. The other one I was giving an example around was the Q&A, the Q&A visual. And so I was
Mhm.
showing the settings of the Q&A visual, which is where you can like do all the extra things, right? Add the synonyms, add the terms, add the descriptions, like all the other things you need to do to make the natural Q&A better for users. And my guidance was like, look, you guys are just starting out in Power BI. Don't worry about this right now, right? Don't use the Q&A visual because it just gives so many, not different, but it gives such a broad spectrum of results that I feel like when I've used Q&A in the past, I've gotten frustrated because in my mind, I know what I want, and the AI I wasn't able to speak to the AI or type in words the right way to the AI to tell it how to get the visual back out, right? So we weren't quite there yet. So I said, look, hold off. First, get good at getting your data together. Your first stage of Power BI is just automate everything, get some solid semantic models done, get people using the tool, teach them how to use the filter pane, right? Here's the pain points we typically see people having. Start there. Once you have really good working models and they're being used a lot, now let's introduce Q&A on top of them. So to me, it's like not a phase 1 thing. It's like a phase 2 or 3 thing where I'm going to really dive in and use the Q&A visuals.
Yeah, I can't wait to see where this goes. And honestly, this is the really cool stuff that I'm happy with Copilot. And this is all going to be in Power BI desktop too, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I believe the images they're showing is Power BI desktop and all this.
Okay. So
But the trick is like you have to have something. So this is the episode we had a couple of weeks ago where Adam Saxton jumped in and got our hopes up with Guy in a Cube, and then immediately dashed them halfway through the episode where we were like, oh, Copilot can be used on F2 SKUs, like on a smaller SKU. You can use it wherever you want because my developers may want to use Copilot. Like if we're finding all this value in like adding descriptions and adding measures and synonyms, like if it's a time saver, now it's worth my effort to use these tools, use Copilot to help me save time. Like that's worth it to me. I guess the question would be is how much is your time worth, right? At that point. If you're doing a lot of documentation on models, is it worth $20 a month? Are you saving a couple hours of your time using these things? Maybe we're getting
probably are.
You probably are, but it would require like so. It's the idea of like if I'm making lots of semantic models, then it makes sense to use this. But if you did one model and you're done, it doesn't make sense to keep Copilot on forever and ever because you don't need it all the time.
Oh my gosh, and also too, if some of it's just going through code, right? If I'm just going through either the TMDL queries, I mean that's really just text at that point. No, you wouldn't have to connect to anything. Theoretically, so theoretically, if I'm looking
I don't
at
follow what you're talking about.
Okay,
I don't have to connect to anything. What are you talking about?
What I mean is I don't have to connect to a fabric model. If I'm looking at TMDL,
okay,
really it's all text, right? I don't need to have a connection to the fabric service and look at the semantic model that way. All the information is available in the TMDL.
Are you just talking about like what you're trying to prompt the Copilot with?
Yeah. So let's say I wanted like give me a summary. I'm looking at everything in TMDL, and I have that available, and I'm in Power BI desktop. Well, say, hey, add descriptions to everything. Well, it shouldn't have to go to the fabric service, look at that model and grab the information if it's already on desktop in TMDL and text in the text format, right? Like there's what information would it need to get? So what I'm trying to say is that request shouldn't be that large on your, for your capacity.
Okay, you're saying something
right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So because basically, right, you don't have to go look at rows of data. You're only looking at the metadata.
Yeah, but I mean, the Copilot doesn't run on your machine. There's no
I know.
The model
regardless if it's local.
The model doesn't come down to desktop. It doesn't run there. So you're always going to use some version of compute on Microsoft. I mean, where I think things maybe get a little more interesting here is, what if someone lets you use TMDL, like you have the desktop, you can get TMDL down. I mean, I don't really understand your point here very much. I mean, you're going to have to connect to the service at some level. You're going to have to get the model down anyways. The Copilot runs in the service regardless. What I think we're finding, though, is that Microsoft is getting more efficient on the models. Like DeepSeek came out, and now we have models that can run at a fraction of the cost, right? So
yeah,
obviously, Microsoft and OpenAI are going to pick up on that immediately and start ripping that off and start making models that are third of the price to run and train. Like this, all this is going to do is just going to make the whole economy more efficient. And yes, DeepSeek came out and kind of like I thought it would take out like a $1 trillion of capital that came out. Like you wiped out a ton of money from these big companies. But I think all this is going to do is going to add competition now, and these big companies will now have to make their models faster, more efficient. And all this is doing is making copilots or AI agents or whatever you want to call them more like a commodity. It's going to be the same thing as everything else we take for granted, right? Computers, electricity, water, like all these things that you just consume so much of it because it's easy to get it. That's what AI is going to be doing. AI is going to get so efficient and easy that everyone's going to want to use it. It's going to be interesting. This will be the next couple of years. I think are going to be really interesting to see what happens here. Any other topics we want to cover before we get into our main topic today?
I think we're good. I'm excited to talk about this, Mike.
All right. Well, I'm this second topic here, talking about like TMDL and how TMDL works with Copilot, is very interesting to me. It also is kind of our main part of the topic today. So I'm going to focus a lot of our conversation on jumping into Tabular Editor. So Tabular Editor is something that you use, Tommy, to it's an advanced modeling tool for the pro developer, I would argue. And then we're going to kind of see, where does TMDL fit? And I'm also going to throw in here DAX Query View. How do these different tools help us? And did TMDL just obsolete Tabular Editor? Do we not need Tabular Editor anymore? I don't know.
Bold statement.
Let's unpack this. Tommy, give us some kind of overview of what we're going to talk about for the main topic today.
Yeah, so really it's just with all the announcements and updates to TMDL that's been going on, I think it's probably the due time to actually compare the TMDL way of scripting, and you've talked a ton about this in the automation, compared to what the only option was available, which was Tabular Editor and macros and scripts. C# scripting in its finest. Now, you can use them side by side, but really are different workflows. And you're dealing with data in a different way. You're kind of dealing with different files, so to speak. One's Tabular Editor 3. One's still going through the metadata of a model of a .bim. TMDL's all this new language, and it's much more structured. Again, something you'd be using VS Code. You can open a TMDL project in Power or Tabular Editor, totally fine. But again, when it comes to what I can actually do once I'm looking at code versus Tabular Editor, really, I think a few things we want to discuss today is this coming of TMDL. Like, where do you see it? What did you see that its benefits are better than the previous enterprise workflows that are out there? Where does Tabular Editor still fit in, or where I guess TMDL would not necessarily compete with? And then how do we see this coming into the future? Where do I need to know both? And like how the skill levels are? Do they split up the type of person? So really kind of how are they going to play together? So I think it's really due time to talk about automation with the two coding or tools that we now have available to us. TMDL in preview and Tabular Editor 3 or 2 as well, but C# macros.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, Tommy. I don't like writing C#. Just point blank. No. Like, I mean, if you think about the accessibility of these two different tools, like TMDL, easy to read. I can clearly understand what's happening in the semantic model with TMDL. So already, to me, I'm already putting in the camp of TMDL Editor or TMDL View. It's already got a win in my book. TMDL Editor is made for easy use with the semantic model. And where do I use the semantic model? I'm using it in desktop. I'm building things directly there. I'm making changes to things. I got to be honest. I've been teaching this class this week. And, we've had DAX Query View for a while now, but I am heavily jumping into the DAX Query View. I'm writing queries. I'm actually finding I like the experience of teaching new users about dimensions and facts and making it easier for people to use that information to write out the measure in the evaluate statement. Now, it's a little bit different, right? But I can right click on an item in the tree navigation, and then automatically I get the definition of the measure. I can right click and have a dummy measure populated for me that I can go modify, just change the name of things, which is awesome. But then I was moving measures between data models. And if you're moving measures between models, that's a pain. It's a big pain. But now you can do it with a couple clicks. You can script everything out from one table, all the measures, copy the code, go to a different model, paste the code, and then with a one button press, update it. I mean, this is changing my workflow on how I do things with writing measures.
So that's this interesting place that you start right off the bat, right? When it comes to like copying things over, because that is available in the Tabular Editor 3 interface. Just it's not, we'll say, as straightforward. You can actually create a DAX script
Yes.
where that's copy paste and then find different places if you have
You can
different table
you can
names.
click on the measures and say script measures or script table, right? And it
Right.
does its version of like, hey, here's how to define this. But again, my argument here is they're not using YAML. They're not using like an easy to
No.
read structure. It's whatever tabular editor's language is. But again, I'll argue let's talk about this. The 30 million users that are showing up to Power BI to use it every day from Microsoft's earnings call, right? If we have 30 million users, what do you think the proportion of those users who know C# are? I would argue most of this is
Mhm.
business users. So that's a very, I don't know, 5%, 1%, I don't know, some small number, right? It's not a lion's share of those 30 million users. People are just showing up because they're trying to build reports, connect to us Excel files, connect to things in SharePoint, get it into reports, get it in PowerBI.com. That's the majority of people I think are doing that kind of work. So if I look at that and say, okay, which tool is easier for that user? Point blank easier. It's going to be the TMDL view or the DAX query view. It's going to be easier. I don't want to write C#. So I think that to me, that's just a big ding against Tablet Editor at this point. Not that it isn't powerful.
Listen, yeah.
But if you learn C# and you can use it in Tablet Editor, yeah, you're going to save a lot of time, 100%. No question there. It's just a matter of, is the learning curve now too steep? And do I just want to use the actual desktop program? And I think we're getting to a place where desktop's getting pretty good.
So let's pause here because I think the big focus is, and I'm right with you with the C# scripts. I actually always followed. I want to give a shout out to Bernard Aguillo, who is maybe one of the coolest people in terms of writing C# scripts. And I've tried diving into him and replicating what he's done. And like he said, he had to set up his own environment, Visual Studio. I'm like, I want to actually get really good at this because what that would be was basically be able to do for me. But it's not easy, especially if, like again, learning C# is such a, in a sense, advanced language as it is. It's like that a lot of the stuff that I've done is, quick modifications. There's been a lot of times I've come on this podcast over the years where was knee deep into a C# script and the podcast had to start. And I'm like, I just need to finish how to do this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but a lot of people don't have that time.
Well, just simple things like let's just say I want to script out all my measures from the table and just see what the formatting of every measure is. Just look at it. Do that in desktop right now. You can't do it. That only appears in TMDL editor. And it's literally again, this is the point of like where's the friction coming from, right? So on one hand, if I am going to pay for Tablet Editor 3, I have to pay for it, right? On the other hand, if I'm using Tablet Editor 2, it's free, right? But now I have to go into desktop. I have to click an external tool. I have to get the tool open, right? Okay. Not super friction filled, but those are like 3 or 4 extra clicks.
Yeah.
Now with TMDL Editor, I just go to TMDL Editor, drag the table, drop it in the window, boom, it just shows up. I mean, Rui's the PM for the TMDL editing stuff, and dude, he's killing it. He is a developer. He knows what to build. Everything in that tool is just right. It's done correctly. So good. I can't speak highly enough about it.
And it's interesting you talk about too like even some of the replication, right? And because I'm gonna share something about my own tablet editor kind of environment. And again, I love it. I use macros and everything all the time, but it's important to note they're not synced anywhere. Like I actually take my tablet editor environment and basically have a Git repo of it that I have. And again, you want to talk about convoluted, Mike? What I have to do,
I know.
because
I
if
understand.
I lost my macros,
You're
I
done.
would I would lose myself. I actually created a dang script, and this was one of those like 2 a.m. kind of things where it will actually look at the tablet editor macros, copy them, put them in a repo, and then zip it up, push it to a private repo. So just in case something were to happen, I can always be in sync. But it's very convoluted to do that because those macros I could not replicate because I don't know C#.
Yep.
Now that I have them, they're great. But now, to your point with TMDL,
You got those scripts from is that from Renat that you got them from, or just found them from on the internet, or how'd you get them?
So one started as inspiration, but this was like a 2-day, 3-day thing where I just didn't check email, and I'm like, I just wanted to get this. It's actually really cool. But yeah, this was Tommy learning C#, which meant Tommy was having a hard time learning C#, but it works. But it's still convoluted because.
But I don't understand. You made these from. You said you made them from somewhere. You made them then. I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so someone had a script where they could just basically copy like macros from the local file. I'm like, I wonder if I could create something that would basically take all my settings, configure it in a zip file, so I have the latest date backup kind of thing, and so then I can push that up, and I can also use that same script if I go to another tab like computer. It will then push it to the wherever tab editor reads from. So it's cool, it's seamless, but again, it's the only thing that really Tablet Editor 3 is if you don't have those macros, right? Like having the macros, it's amazing the workflow. Without them, it makes it really hard. Now let's compare that to TMDL, what you're saying here with the environment. Anyone can download VS Code and that environment's pretty easy because that's when I'm using TMDL, Mike, where are you going to recommend people to go? The Power BI desktop in that view? Or okay, let's dive into that one.
I mean, so here's what's happening. Desktop is eating into that pro developer space a lot more than it used to be, right? These are things I've heard the complaint from other companies, right? Hey, our company will allow us to use Power BI because Microsoft made it. Great. We won't let you use third-party tools because it's not sanctioned by Microsoft. It's not secure. We don't know who they are, right? There's all kinds of reasons behind this, right? That's not our policy, whatever, fine. That meant all the people who were using Power BI had their hands strapped to some degree. It was a little bit less efficient for them to automate or do automation or repetitive things, right? I'm telling everyone right now, when I used to communicate about Power BI Desktop, I used to think about two different windows. I don't really use the data view very much, the table view. Table view is interesting, but I don't really use it very much. It's like looking at the information. I couldn't write DAX on it. I couldn't manipulate anything. It didn't really do much, right? So table view was, in my opinion, okay. But I would talk about Power BI Desktop as being, there's two things the desktop builds. It builds the report side, and it builds the semantic model. And we can see that when we publish things to the service. So I'd always communicate to people, look, desktop is building a single PBIX file, but it's actually two components. It's the semantic model and the report. Before, I would only communicate about the model view, about this is how we look at and view the model. That's where we do most of our model work now. Well, now we have DAX Query View and TMDL Editor. So now I have three windows to help me design, build, shape, look at the information that's there. It's so much easier to read. It's much clearer. Everything is clearer. And this also, I think, is an advantage for us as Power BI developers. Any new feature Microsoft builds, if they add something, let's say they add this new cool feature inside the semantic model. Maybe they embed Copilot as part of I don't know, configuring Copilot inside the semantic model as part of the semantic model. I don't know what they're going to build, right? Any new feature they come up with can automatically be accessed through the TMDL editor. The feature's there. I'm not waiting on, I don't have to wait on other tools like Tabular Editor or other like Bravo. All these other tools, you have to rely upon them to update themselves so they can use the latest features of the semantic model. Well, because TMDL's built into the tool, as new features are released, Microsoft themselves will make sure that that part of the tool is always going to work with these latest semantic model features. Or if they're building new semantic model features, they're going to make sure that it works inside the TMDL editor because it's part of their tool. So for that reason, I think it's going to be, I'm finding, as me personally, I think desktop is becoming more and more the pro developer tool and not a beginner tool. I think you're going to be able to start really pushing on people to build reports in the service at a much higher rate. I don't think you're going to need desktop as much anymore. And again, just all the things that I've seen from the product team, almost all the things that are coming to desktop, they're almost all going to make it to the service as well, which is interesting to me that they're building these features in desktop first, like TMDL editor. You can use that in desktop, but you can't use it in the service. There's no TMDL editor equivalent in the service yet. I have suspicions that that will probably be a thing at some point in the future.
So as it seems, as we kind of transitioned into TMDL, because like, you know, it has the TMDL scripting, we know it's going to be more collaborative. I guess, are you finding yourself really not opening Tableau Editor as much anymore?
I mean, I wasn't opening it a ton to begin with. I mean, I used it a couple times for some certain things, like, you know, when I was like, where was I using Tableau Editor, right? I've got a really old analysis services model that I've got to move into Power BI, right? I've got to script it out and figure out how to make, like, that's when I would use it. I'd go after the BIM. I could see the whole BIM. Everything was formatted very well. Great. Let's imagine I wanted to go to a semantic model and I wanted to get all the little tiny files out of it, right? I want to take the model and not have it just become a single BIM, a JSON file. I want it broken out into small JSON files. That's what I would use Tableau Editor for. But now a lot of those very basic features, I don't use it anymore. I mean, unless you're, so in Tableau Editor, if you're not doing advanced things like writing scripts and consuming scripts and heavy automation, I don't, what else are you using in it? No. What are you doing in there that you can't do in desktop?
So here's one of the arguments that I think I would make. As much as the TMDL environment much more readable, some people still like a user interface, and I know you say Power BI Desktop has one, but let me make an argument here. The ability to quickly edit items, create items in a user interface is more efficient in Tableau Editor, I would argue. To quickly create a measure, to quickly go through the properties. I think that's easier in Tableau Editor because you don't have to load the whole model. It will push it back. I still have that nice user interface and I can edit multiple things. With Power BI Desktop, like creating a measure is fine. You know, you have the formula bar, and if I were to create a measure using a DAX, I'm going to use the DAX box in Tableau Editor, not Power BI Desktop. It's just,
but that's my point though. My point is I used to do that. Like that used to be my method. With DAX query view, I don't need that anymore. Like I can right click and define a measure and it writes the whole measure for me. All I have to do is update the so take that best part, that thing you were saying that was in Tableau Editor, that now exists in desktop. So like if I'm writing DAX now, I don't like to write DAX on the model view. I don't like to write DAX on the report view anymore. Because in my past building experiences, I would use the report view, I'd make the measure, and then I would immediately go to the model and grab some details and throw on on the page, the report page, I would immediately throw down a dimension and then throw the measure right in it. Great. I don't have to do that anymore. I can write the measure in DAX query view and then right click on the measure and say define and evaluate. It will immediately make a summarized columns for that measure for me. And then I can just start adding dimensions however I want, just start typing it in. And that's really efficient. And when I'm coming back to that, it doesn't clutter up my report space. It doesn't make extra pages that I don't care about. Like my whole workflow is changing as we speak. And I knew this was going to be a game changer because this is such a big change.
And from a developer point of view, I agree. And I'm finding myself transition. I will play the devil's advocate here. It's so developer heavy. I mean, it feels like it's basically looking at YAML, right? Like more or less, if you were to think of some equivalent, like a syntax.
I don't understand your comment here because what you're describing is the same thing that Tableau Editor does. It's so developer heavy. There's not any more UI differences between the two. Like I don't see your point there.
Yeah. So I'm making the argument that Tableau Editor, you don't have to create the macros in order to, in a sense, start automating or be efficient. Like I can download Tableau Editor Desktop today. I can use the debug view, go through everything. I can create multiple measures at a time. If I do need something where I want to create a bunch of measures on the fly, there I can just Google search, find that repo, and I'm pretty set kind of thing to get the basic automation done. I'm really not looking at code, or everything's in a user interface.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, but I mean, a couple of the friction points that I have with tablet editor is, and I know, again, I'm not in it as much as I used to be, right? I'm doing
Right.
more architectural and governance
Right.
things as I've kind of gone through my career now, but you know, things that I find that are more challenging in tablet editor is I could never find which screen is the right screen to put up. I'm always getting lost in where that view lives.
That old VS Studio view.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really love that. It seems old. It doesn't seem fresh like other things now. So, one thing I will give a lot of credit to. So I have been really poo pooing Tablet Editor through this conversation so far, but I will give it some good credit. Is Tablet Editor does do a good job of exposing all the properties for every single thing you need, right? So the properties pane on the right hand side, when you click on a table, partitions, all the different things, you can see everything that it's making inside the UI there. So I think in that regard, that is extremely helpful, and seeing all the properties there. That's something that the TMDL editor or DAX Query View does not provide you. There's no like single window with all the properties, which is fine, but you may want to adjust a property that you don't know the name of it. And so for you to go in and dig and find it, it's just a little bit more work. So I would that would be one area where I would say I'd give a thumbs up or a nod to Tabular Editor. It does a good job of giving you all the things you can do with the model and gives you all the properties, even if they're not filled out yet. TMDL Editor doesn't give you that. It only gives you the properties that have been changed.
So I have I don't know if you had anything else on this, because one of the things with knowing that we now have 50 million Power BI users,
30.
30 million. Sorry, excuse me.
Don't overinflate the number.
I'm not going to overinflate. We'll get there. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Do you see, in terms of really the primary audience for either I'm using Tableau Editor or I'm using TMDL, is it the same person in terms of like that same persona? Because I think you can make the argument that really from the TMDL view, that is, I mean, really just developer heavy, and I could just be a Power BI expert and use Tableau Editor.
That's a
Do
good
they
question.
overlap? Yeah. So where do you kind of see it going in terms of both of these kind of heavy? We'll call them. I'm not going to say just developer tools, but enterprise tools or advanced tools.
I think I want to answer your question with just talking about like a spectrum of people who use things that are Power BI. Let's start at the
Sure.
ends, right? So when we talk about Power BI, I think I'm looking at the spectrum of someone who consumes a report all the way up to a data engineer, barely using reports, but just shaping and making data. Okay. So I think if I'm going to make the goalposts, those are those are the different end zones, or those are the two different ends of the spectrum.
I think perfectly fair.
Okay. So if we walk from let's start with the conversation around a user who is only consuming reports, right? They're only using apps. They don't need any of this stuff. They don't even need desktop for that matter. They're just going to go to the service, they're going to consume it, right? So one layer deeper than that would be someone who's building reports, not necessarily making semantic models. They're given a semantic model and they're just making their own report pages. Okay. They're going to probably use the service. Maybe they're going to use some Power BI desktop. They'll probably make some thin measures, very easy ones, albeit inside the thin report, but nothing too heavy. Maybe they're going to make some DAX inside a visual calculation. Although I don't actually ever use that feature. I don't really see it valuable, but okay, some people will do it. Let's move further to the next persona, which is the data modeler. The data modeler is like a really good blend between someone who knows how to build reports and also knows how to build data engineering things. They need to be technical enough to write and read code, but they don't need to be. They need to also have an understanding of the business logic. How do I shape the data tables, right? So it's. I think the data modeler is a very senior business analyst, right? It's the one who's been doing it, like not a brand new one, not fresh out of college, right? They know what they're doing. They're more seasoned, and they're able to show up and really build that semantic model that makes sense, right? And then we start moving towards data engineer. And I would probably say from the data modeler, we talk data engineering, right? Okay, so you asked me, where do these tools fit? Where do these tools align? I think both TMDL View and Tabular Editor 3 are sitting on that very technical end. It's the data engineer level person or the very advanced semantic model people. Those are the individuals that I think will be using these tools. So is one tool better than the other ones? Yeah, tablet editor I think has been around longer. It's got more development time on it, but also is more expensive, right? Again, why is Power BI so well adopted? Well, it was easy to land and spread in organizations because a lot of it was initially free, and then people started finding value from it, and then people started paying for it. So, I mean, I think if you compare the price point of like tabular editor and TMDL, I mean, TMDL's going to win every day, and so I'm okay not spending some extra time learning C# scripts if I can just take a little bit longer in a free tool that I can use and get around in. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I think, I don't know if that really answered your question, but I think these two tools address that really high end data modeler and data engineer. Those are the individuals that are going to be using these tools, that are going to be building large, big semantic models. And I would also argue too, the larger your data model gets in size, the bigger amount of gigabytes it takes, the more you're going to want to use tabular editor, because it's going to make some of those larger model experiences easier to work with. And I'm thinking specifically like refreshing your model, building partitions, creating incremental refresh. Some of those things are hard to diagnose and see what's going on. And that's where the tool really shines, I think.
Yeah. And honestly, I think from the heavy developer view, like TMDL is going to be the way to go. It's going to be more familiar probably with any other projects you've done. But I still want to, I think, still make the case that there's still a road where I'm not a developer. I'm just a heavy Power BI user. And there's still the user interface part that's nice, that I may not ever have to put my feet into that side of the water of looking at the code. I probably eventually will. Like, I see that happening where
I'm gonna disagree with you. If you're a heavy Power BI user, you better be like, I'm not hiring you if you don't know how to use the code. Honestly, seriously, if you tell me I'm a heavy Power BI user and you haven't spent some time learning like what the BIM is, getting into TMDL, doing those things, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in hiring you. So like, heavy Power BI user, I solely disagree with you. I don't think I don't think I would require you to go learn tabular editor. If you have those skills, great, I'll take them. Great, you know how you understand what's going on. But like, I'm not going to require an advanced Power BI user to require them to know how to use tabular editor. I think honestly, I would be more advantaged to hiring you if you already knew how to use the BIM, the TMDL, and the DAX query view to your advantage.
Interesting. So
Yes,
I'm
100% disagree.
no, because how I ooh
If you're advanced, you better learn how to know. You better know how to write code. Code should be your thing.
yeah.
If you're advanced, any like, doesn't matter.
Ooh, that is such a hot take. I feel like in our
A
world.
beginner user is the one who needs user interfaces. A beginner user doesn't know what properties exist, right? That's for beginners.
Oh, I this is a hot take, Mike, because how many Power BI pros do you know who are advanced stacks, but they have never worked on a Python project, whatever the case may be. That
Don't care.
those
It's not Python.
or whatever the case
You're a
is
heavy
going to
Power BI
be.
modeler. Like, you better know
Yeah.
like you better understand like how the tables relate, like what kind of properties are being set on the column. Again, it's a semantic model. It's all metadata. It describes what you're trying to do with the model, right? If I have a better user interface with TMDL, which again, TMDL's hugely beneficial. There's tons of value from this. Like, that's what I want. I'd rather. So let me say it this way. Let me just give you a comparison. If I had 100 hours of time to train people on, right, and I'm going to say spend 100 hours working on tabular editor, learning it, or spend 100 hours learning the BIM, the model, and the code that comes out of TMDL, I would choose go learn that, in my opinion, because that is going to be long-term sustaining, and we're just in the beginning stages of TMDL editor. We're just starting. Who knows how good this is going to get in the future? I mean, Rui's on it. Rui's got an amazing team. He's got great features. I mean, we're just starting the space of this. We did a live video. We did a demo of it, and Rui was talking about like we have create or replace right now as far as an action in the TMDL editor. Rui's also talking about other actions that are going to be coming out, additional actions. So that's going to be huge when that gets to become more capable. So I think, to me, like if I look at the two options here, the runway for what TMDL can do, I think is much more open right now. And it's coming directly from Microsoft. Let's drive adoption. This whole episode of me is like, get in there, learn the tool, go click the buttons. Let's get some analytics on this for Rui's team, because if you're not in there playing with the tool, Rui can't get funding to build more cool features for us. Like I want that to happen.
This is, you know what? And ultimately, though, too, the way TMDL's going, I do agree with you. I'm obviously playing a bit of the devil's advocate here, but let's get this GA, man. And obviously this is going to be I don't know what it's going to take, but until it's GA too, that's going to be another hindrance. But it is what I've wanted all along, to be able to look at my Power BI model and my report in, it doesn't have to be non-binary, so to speak.
Let me give you one other lens here as well. Let me just blow your mind here for a second. Tommy, you're a big proponent of co-pilots or AI agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me just hypothetically here, right? Microsoft, if you're listening, please bring down my capacity to use Copilot down to an F2. I need this. This is a feature I need, honestly, because I don't have a ton of money at my company. A lot of companies are just starting out with Fabric. We need Copilot at a lower level so we can start seeing the value of it at a lower level. Now, here's my point, Tommy. If you could use Copilot inside TMDL Editor and giving it actions to build code for you, who cares about the UI? Honestly, I mean, real, right? Like if I can chat with the Copilot and highlight a bit of text and say, explain this. What does this property mean? Format all my measures format all of my columns to have this kind of formatting. I don't need to know the syntax. I don't need to know. It just knows what to do and says, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And it goes through, because it's going to be able to learn on top of hundreds of thousands of other models. It should be able to be programmed on all the syntax of every single formatting for every single kind of column or measure or visual, like the model pieces. Like at that point, I'm like, well, screw it. I don't want to even have the UI. I want to just see the code and I want to talk to a Copilot and say, do the thing. And things that I don't understand or know, the Copilot knows about them. The Copilot will suggest something for me and it will work. So that's, I'm going to say, I want TMDL Editor to just totally leapfrog anything that has a UI with it. Just get rid of it. Just write to codes.
I feel it warms up on that take, but everything up to that point, I agreed with you. Because again, you and I, we kind of live in that world. We love that. Like, we're more comfortable being in a project like VS Code or something like that than not. But again, you take the majority of people who are like, I know DAX, but now I have to all those other things too. Yeah, I that's where I divert from you. Everything else you said, yeah, no, and like we're completely going that way. Now, taking away the UI, that may be, you already want to take away desktop, put it in the web. Now you don't even want it on the web.
It's just ethereal. Just get rid of all of it. I don't want to have anything.
That's hilarious.
No, it's not. We're going to have something to work on. But like, I agree. Like, I think I want more web versions of this stuff. I want TMDL Editor to get into the web. I want, Copilot to be a bit more everywhere in here. Like that's where I think this is going to start really speeding me up. I think we really need to talk in terms of like, what does that data modeler role look like? I think Microsoft has two roles: data analyst or data engineer. And I think there's a middle ground in between those where you have an advanced analyst, but maybe not quite a data engineer. And that data modeler person, there's a specific set of skills you need in data modeling about working with large models and things. There's just deeper skills that are required there that I don't think fit in the analyst role, and they don't think they fully fit in the data engineering role, at least traditional sense of data engineering. All right, with that, I want to kind of start wrapping here. Final thoughts. If you're not playing with TMDL Editor, definitely go do it. You should go look at the TMDL view inside Power BI Desktop. I believe it's a preview feature. You have to go to your desktop and turn it on to use it. Highly recommended. I am finding a ton of value from it. Tommy's a little more skeptical, but we'll get there. With that, I just want to say thank you all for listening to the podcast. This was a good discussion. A number of hours here just kind of spent with us. Thank you for participating. If you find this discussion interesting, if you liked what you heard here, please go share it with somebody else. And if you're running or exercising, which I've heard a lot of people say this is like my walk of the day, I listen to the podcast. Thank you for walking with us. We appreciate it. And good luck on your exercise. Tommy, where else can you find that podcast?
Oh, you can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. And please share with a friend since we do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to PowerBI.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.